Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to dive into an incredibly fascinating ancient Buddhist text called the Potaliya Sutta. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth does a centuries-old text have to do with us today? Well, as it turns out, it holds a surprisingly precise key to navigating the anxieties, the stress, and the endless hustle of our modern, hyper-connected world. We're going to explore what it actually means to let go of the things that just endlessly weigh us down.
So let's start right off the bat with a pretty provocative question, but one that's honestly highly relatable to human nature across the ages. Are you truly detached, or are you just playing the part? Think about it for a second. How often do we try to fix our internal stress by making these massive, drastic external changes? Like maybe you delete all your social media apps off your phone, or you completely clean out your closet, or declare to the world that you're totally done with toxic workplaces. But somehow that baseline anxiety just creeps right back in, doesn't it? We are incredibly prone to mistaking external lifestyle changes for actual internal growth. And as you'll see, we are absolutely not the first generation to make this mistake. Meet Potaliya. He's the central figure in our text today, and he was a guy who confidently believed he had totally mastered the art of detachment. Early in the text, the Buddha greets Potaliya by referring to him as a householder, which is basically just a term for a regular worldly person. While Potaliya gets immediately offended by this, he gets defensive and essentially says, "Hey, don't call me a householder. All my works I have stopped, all my affairs I have cut off." See, Potaliya mistakenly believed he had achieved this supreme spiritual detachment simply because he had handed all his money, his grain, and his gold over to his sons as an inheritance. He had retired, he figured he had enough food and clothing, and he thought, that's it, I'm enlightened, I've cut off all worldly affairs. But let's look at the stark contrast here, because this is the core conflict. On one hand, you have Potaliya's version of detachment, simply giving up physical wealth, retiring from the family business, and just managing his basic food and clothing. It's entirely superficial, right? On the other hand, the Buddha counters this by explaining true detachment according to the noble discipline. He points out that merely signing over your estate is not the same as cutting off worldly affairs. True detachment actually requires stopping harmful mental and ethical behaviors. It's a complete inside job. To correct this illusion Potaliya is under, the Buddha introduces a profound framework, the 8 factors for cutting off affairs. As you can see in this breakdown, the Buddha tells Potaliya that to truly cut off affairs, he has to give up specific vices, things like killing, stealing, lying, and slander. But it goes way deeper psychologically. He has to abandon greed and lust, anger and blame, irritation and revenge, and finally, arrogance. True detachment means replacing these vices with their exact antidotes, like truthfulness, non-stealing, and actually letting go of that deep-seated anger. Genuine detachment has absolutely nothing to do with the size of your bank account or whether your calendar is clear, and it has everything to do with stopping harmful ethical and psychological behaviors. Okay, so the crucial question is, why must we give these specific things up? The text explains that an awakened person realizes these 8 negative actions and thoughts are literally fetters and hindrances. They're chains. Engaging in greed, anger, or deceit breeds this deep, relentless internal anguish. It causes you to blame yourself, it causes wise people to blame you, and it ultimately leads to a pretty tragic downfall. The Buddha explains that when you completely abandon these behaviors, the anger and the constant anxiety that come attached to them, they just simply cease to exist. To really illustrate the true danger of worldly attachments, the text provides some incredibly vivid metaphors. Let's look at the 7 similes of sensual pleasures. This first simile is just so visceral. I want you to imagine a starving, totally exhausted dog standing by a butcher's block. The butcher tosses the dog a bone, but it's been scraped entirely clean of meat. It's just smeared with a tiny bit of blood. The dog chews and chews, but it can never actually satisfy its hunger. It's left chewing on absolutely nothing. And this brilliantly illustrates how chasing fleeting worldly pleasures, whether that's status, endless scrolling on your phone, or chasing material wealth, it just drains our energy. It leaves us starving, exhausted, and desperately lacking any true, lasting satisfaction. The second metaphor is equally intense. Picture a bird flying high through the sky with a piece of meat in its beak. Instantly, a massive flock of vultures and hawks swoops in. They ruthlessly attack the bird just to steal the meat. If the bird doesn't drop it, it's literally going to be pecked to death. This teaches us that if you cling tightly to worldly attachments and status, you are actively inviting constant conflict, danger, and fierce competition from others. The only way to survive is to let the prize go. Now imagine a man walking into a strong headwind, and he's carrying a blazing torch made of dry grass.
If he doesn't immediately drop that torch, the wind is going to blow those flames right back onto his hand, his arm, and eventually engulf his whole body. Much like holding on to anger, greed, or that desperate need for control, if we don't let go of the burning torch of attachment, we inevitably burn ourselves. We just become the victims of our own clinging.
The remaining 4 similes just strongly reinforce this whole reality. Central pleasures are compared to a pit of glowing coals without smoke. Basically, a hidden, deadly trap you're being dragged right into. They're like a fleeting, beautiful dream, because no matter how amazing it feels, when you wake up, it vanishes entirely. They're like borrowed treasure. Sure, you might look rich for a day, but the true owners are inevitably going to take it all back. And finally, they are like climbing a tall tree to eat delicious fruit while being entirely unaware that someone at the bottom is actively chopping the tree down. These similes make it crystal clear. Worldly attachments are perilous, they're incredibly temporary, and ultimately, they are just not ours to keep. So what actually happens when you finally drop that burning torch? That brings us to equanimity and the 3 knowledges. When a person actually sees worldly attachments for what they truly are, they achieve step 1, unshakable equanimity and purified mindfulness. From that place of stillness, they attain the 3 knowledges. Step 2 is the ability to remember past lives. Step 3 is the divine eye, which is fully understanding karma. And finally, step 4 is the total destruction of all mental taints. We're talking complete, ultimate liberation from suffering. Let's bring this all back down to earth to our friend Potaliya, who has just experienced a massive paradigm shift in the householder's awakening.
Humbled and completely transformed, Potaliya admits his prior ignorance. He softly says, "I was far from the cutting off of affairs. You have turned upright what was overturned, revealed what was hidden." He suddenly realizes that his physical detachment, just giving away his business and his money, was entirely superficial. He had been clinging to this false identity of spiritual superiority, completely blind to the mental fetters that were still heavily tying him down. Following this profound realization, Potaliya declares that he takes refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha for the rest of his life. He completely shifts from being an offended, arrogant man clinging to an illusion to someone actively and humbly walking the path of true internal peace. He finally gets it. He finally understands what actual detachment looks like. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to reflect on your own life today. Take a hard look at the things you stress over, the status you find yourself chasing, the arguments you hold on to. Are you genuinely working on true internal detachment? Or, kind of like the starving dog in that ancient simile we talked about, are you just exhausting yourself chewing on a meatless bone? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Potaliya Sutta, and keep seeking that true internal clarity.